And joining me now is Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who actually recently met with President Zelensky in Ukraine. Senator Murphy, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good morning.
All right, so tell me what your conversation was like with the president, because I believe you met with him before the aid was released.
Right.
And it was during this time that the aid passed by Congress, but for some reason was being held up by the administration. Tell me, was this meeting in Kyiv, number one, and what was the circumstances?
So I went to Kyiv in part because I had heard these concerns from my friends there that the government and Zelensky personally was really worried about these overtures he was getting, in particular from Rudy Giuliani. And he didn't understand whether this was an official government position, these requests to investigate the former vice president. So I went there to make it clear to him that the worst thing that he could do for the U.S.-Ukraine relationship was to get involved in an election here in the United States. I will say what was interesting to me was that he dispensed with the diplomatic protocols of that meeting. As soon as we sat down at the table in the presidential palace, he asked us what was going on with the aid. Why was it being withheld? He seemed very concerned and I think out of sorts about it. And then later in the meeting, I raised with him these overtures from the Trump campaign. He gave me a very strong answer. He said they had no intention to get involved in an American election, that they knew what damage it would do to them. And I left that meeting fairly confident that he understood.
What did the Trump administration tell you officially when you were trying to figure out what the holdup was?
So the reason that was given, in particular to Senator Johnson, who I was there with.
Ron Johnson, Republican from Wisconsin.
Republican from Wisconsin, who had talked with the president shortly before our visit to Kyiv. The reason that was given was that the president was concerned about corruption in Ukraine, and he thought that the Europeans should be providing the aid instead of the United States. Those were the two reasons that were stated to us as we went. The embassy there didn't seem to have really a readout from the White House at all when we asked them about it.
Do you have any reason to believe that the aid was suddenly released in connection with the discovery of this whistleblower complaint into the public?
I mean, the timing is obviously incredibly suspicious. There was also a pending vote in the Appropriations Committee that was going to require next year's aid to be released outside of the discretion of the president. There are likely a bunch of different explanations. Political pressure was mounting on the president from Republicans, but obviously the timing of this looks really terrible.
I want to show you another coincidence that we noticed here. These are the departures among people that were involved in Russian and Ukraine policy decisions inside the Trump administration. The two top officials from DNI, July 28th, August 8th. Then you have three top officials in and around the State Department or NSC. The ambassador to Ukraine in May was forced out. The president's Russia advisor, Fiona Hill, resigned in June. Obviously, the ambassador to Russia, John Huntsman, in August. Maybe they're all coincidences. I'm not saying that. Anything about that timeline of all those folks that you find troubling, because it's all happening at the same time that Giuliani is doing his thing and the president is doing his thing.
So the departure of the ambassador, one of the individuals on that screen, was very troubling to many of us. She was a incredibly experienced, very well thought of diplomat. There seemed to be no reasons for her departure. And it's one of the reasons why in May I sent a letter to the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate asking them to investigate these overtures that Giuliani had been making and whether one of the demands that was being made was that this ambassador leave, because perhaps the ambassador at the time was frustrating the Trump's campaign's efforts to try to get this new president to investigate Biden's.
I want some clarity here. Is the allegation that Rudy Giuliani was trying to get this ambassador out, or the Ukrainians wanted our ambassador out?
I think the worry is that it may have been amongst the Trump campaign's demands. And I think it's really important to get to the bottom of why she left, under what circumstances she left, and what was she unwilling to do.
I want to put up a tweet that you sent out, I believe yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. Don't get creative, you write. Don't look for new, interesting angles. This one is as simple as it gets. If an American president gets away with bullying foreign countries to do his political bidding, then we should just give up and accept our new banana republic. What's the next step?
Well, I don't frankly think it matters whether there was an explicit quid pro quo in this conversation with Zelensky. I think if an American president is asking another foreign leader to interfere in an American election, essentially what we're trying to figure out, what was going on between Trump and Putin, then there has to be consequences for that. We spent a year trying to figure out whether he had asked Putin to interfere. We just found out he asked Zelensky to interfere. I don't know that it matters. It's another country.
Okay, so you're saying that an impeachment investigation should be opened up right now?
I think
if you were in the House still, you were a former House member, you're now in the Senate, you could be a juror. I understand that. But at this point, it sounds like you're saying this one's open and shut. Don't be, you just said here, don't get creative.
Yeah, I think this one would be open and shut if we had more information than simply anonymous sources that newspapers have written on. I think the whistleblower has to come forward. I think that Republicans who claim to be national security experts need to demand that the whistleblower present himself or herself before Congress. But I think if we do have evidence from this whistleblower that the president indeed tried to bully a foreign power into affecting our elections, then we have to do something about
that. By the way, when the aid got released, they got an additional $140 million. Where did that come from?
Yeah, maybe an overcorrection on behalf of the president. So,
do you know where that came from?
No, I don't know the source of that secondary funding.
Did you guys appropriate this money?
The president certainly has discretionary money that's available to him. It may have come from those accounts.
But you have no idea, and suddenly they got more aid. So do you view that as troubling?
Listen, I think this whole timeline is hard to figure out, and there may be someone who can tell us more about all of it, and that whistleblower individual has to come before Congress.
Senator Toomey is going to come on here right after you. We're going to be discussing some other issues, but one of them is guns. He's pushing for Manchin Toomey. Where are you on this? Did Beto O'Rourke, Chuck Schumer essentially is almost pointing the finger that Beto O'Rourke has set things back, has he?
Oh, I don't think that's true. Listen, I think Republicans who don't want to vote for a background checks bill are going to look for any excuse to do it. Beto's comments may be their latest hook. But the fact of the matter is, if Donald Trump supports a bill that expands background checks, we will get 60 votes for it in the Senate. The Attorney General brought up to Congress last week a fairly reasonable proposal that would expand background checks to commercial sales. There's some things I don't like about it, but it's absolutely a platform for negotiation. The NRA opposes it, and so the critical question now is sitting on the president's desk. Is he willing to take on the NRA? If he is, we'll get a background check.
By the way, you sound like a guy that says, hey, take what you can get every time you have a chance. Don't try to let the perfect be the enemy of this.
I mean, on this issue, this is about life and death, right? There are very few other issues that are like it. And I also think that maybe what's most important in the long-term perspective of the anti-gun violence movement is breaking this rock-solid alliance between the NRA and Republicans, and this may be our chance to do it.
Democratic Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, thanks for coming on and sharing your views, sir.
Of course.
Appreciate it. Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.